Data science is a hugely interesting area with a ton of potential, yet at the same time, there is a lot of hype and misconceptions about what it is and what is involved. One of the things I really want to do with this channel is cut through a lot of that hype to figure out what data scientists are doing in real life situations to actually help businesses achieve the value of data science. In this episode, I get to talk to my friends Milo Alexander and Jafar Almosad, who are the founders of Omni Business Solutions, which is a data science startup and consultancy. The main product, Batlass, is a location insight tool developed in R. Batlass helps businesses to effectively research an area in order to identify business opportunities with the help of some AI. When talking to data scientists, it's pretty easy to get carried away with somewhat technical conversations. Throughout this conversation, we also get to talk about the other side of that, which is really just as important to the success of data science projects as well. A key takeaway from this conversation is that we have a ton of cool tools and technology at our disposal now. However, without effective change management, without taking stakeholders along on the journey with you, without solving real-world business problems, while also taking into consideration the very human element of things, which are people's desires and fears, then it's really hard to gain the true value of a data science project. I remember seeing an interview with Jeff Bezos, where he said something along the lines of, technology is not revolutionary. It's when you take technology, turn that into a product, and people start to use that product, that's when it becomes revolutionary. So, products themselves are not revolutionary, but it's the users that make them revolutionary. So without users, you can't have a revolutionary technology or product. It's these type of principles that I think Milo and Jafar understand really, really well. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to my friends Milo and Jafar. If you're new to this channel and you're keen to learn the latest tips, tricks, and tools for working more effectively with data, please hit the subscribe button for weekly videos. I'm joined here today with my friends Milo Alexander and Jafar Almosad. These guys are the founders of Omni Business Solutions, which provide data science and AI solutions to businesses. So it's really great to have you on this call today. And do you want to tell us a little bit more about some of the business that you do and some of the solutions that you provide for your clients?
We at Omni Business Solutions, we are a tech startup and we provide AI and machine learning solutions to large enterprises and government. Our flagship is actually called Batlass, the Business Atlas. And what it does is it provides location, insight, and intelligence to basically anyone who needs that kind of insight and intelligence. That includes franchisors, lenders, banks, insurance companies, and local governments. Of course, we also provide consulting services regarding data analysis, integrating machine learning into workflows, understanding business problems, giving advice, and so on.
Right, fantastic. So Batlass is it's a property insight. So it's getting information to help people select the right properties for their business situations.
It is a location insight. So for instance, imagine a coffee franchisors that want to expand their business, want to open a new stores, coffee shops, and they're wondering what could be the best location to do that. And best location means a place where there is demand, but there isn't much competition. And doing that involves a lot of manual data analysis, scouting locations, and it is a repetitive process because if the first location was not good enough, the process needs to be repeated for a second, third, fourth location until then the company finds it's a satisfying location. With Batlass, all you need to do is just see what you are looking for on a map. There is no need for data input. There's no need for any kind of expertise. All you have to do is select the area, the neighborhood you are interested in, and select the business type. Or sometimes it depends on what you do really. So if you say want if you are interested in Camden area for a coffee shop, all you have to do is select Camden and select coffee shop, and it will tell you exactly where in Camden you can actually invest and you can consider. It also helps with the due diligence process with the information that it provides, information about the demographics, about the income rate, about so many other variables that are very, very helpful, all in one location. So I think it is great in the sense that there's no data input requirement, which sets Butless really apart from another software in the market, and there's no need for expertise because the prediction is actually uh, provided by AI and machine learning models.
Very nice. Yeah, there's a very cool demo actually. So for anybody who wants to check that out, actually, there's a cool little video on your YouTube channel, which is definitely worth watching. It's a nice example, really, of how we can find solutions to, I guess, solve business problems, right? So
Yeah.
and for this particular application, I understand that you developed this using some R and Shiny to put this together.
Yes, precisely. We made a decision to use R instead of Python here because I believe R is more intuitive, it's easier to use, and with R Studio, the IDE is great. R Shiny is fantastic.
Yeah.
So, and you can build websites, web applications without needing a web server. So everything is just integrated in one place. And we actually also use our Markdown for report generation, which I found to be so powerful. I don't think there's as powerful libraries for Python, for example, that can do the same thing. ggplot library is also awesome. It's just fantastic. You can generate any type of report, any type of visualizations that you need or your clients need within R itself.
Yeah, no, that's awesome to see actually, because I think a lot of times people look at things like R for the kind of statistical research and these different types of things, but actually seeing you guys have R and use it in production and actually using it to build applications is really cool to see.
Yeah, true.
Cool. And I understand that we were talking a little bit earlier. You're also helping to do some education as well, going in to help different schools and different things like that to help teach them a little bit about machine learning and some of the different aspects of that.
Yes, Milo?
Yeah, that's correct. Because from my vantage point is, even though machine learning seems like a massive mystery to a lot of individuals, us as data scientists and coders, we're very familiar with that, but it's almost like singing to the choir or preaching to the choir. We've got to get other individuals, and it starts from a young age. So if we're able to bridge the gap and speak to the community, speak to the people in the community, let them understand and demystify the sort of hocus pocus surrounding machine learning, then you reduce the anxiety and you make a trusted community where people can have a conversation more. And that's our approach. And because at the end of the day, if you have a product, whatever it is, if you do not get the masses involved, you're not going to go anywhere. So our standpoint is to engage with the communities, and it starts with the young and pups in the primary schools, secondary schools, colleges, universities, and that way there's a bigger conversation, and that way there's a massive knowledge of wealth and exchange of both groups.
Wow, that's impressive. So you're even going into even at primary school level, you're starting to teach them a little bit about machine learning. I'm curious in a way, how do you explain to, I'm not too sure what age group that you're kind of going to, but how would you explain machine learning to somebody in a primary school level?
For example, it's simple framing. So you say to them, look, as a child, for example, as a child, you have a baby, mum and dad teaches the baby, identifies, look, this is good, this is bad, this is dangerous. So the parents are the intermediary to explain to the children, but it's not until the baby touches the fire, goes to the wrong place, then they automatically understand. So you say, look, machine learning is a smart tool that automatically adapts to the surrounding, whereas AI is having the parent tell the machine, or the smart tool is having the engineers program. But machine learning is it doing it automatically, and you do it in nice colorful videos. So if you've seen some of our videos, it's nice and colorful. There's a video there, machine learning, and it has unicorns. It really uses it to engage. That's what you do. You don't go into long sort of drawn out topics of which people cannot understand. You have to simplify everything. And in machine learning, or even in computers, what do they simplify everything to? Binary, ones and zeros. And that's how you simplify it to primary school students, so that they go, oh, okay, just like a baby. I used to be a baby. Now I can do things on my own. Perfect. Bingo.
Yes, actually, my 11-year-old son has published his first LinkedIn article where he actually compared Python and R from business and machine learning perspective.
Oh, wow. That's impressive. I was definitely got a great head start there.
True. Yes.
Oh, very nice. And okay, so that's a kind of nice way of introducing machine learning to kids, because I think that definitely machine learning is going to be a huge part of the future, really. I mean, a lot of things are now heading down the machine learning path, although it's also important to point out as well that machine learning also isn't everything as well, right? It basically gives us new functionality, right, that we haven't had before. So, there's a lot of other kind of techniques and everything as well, which aren't necessarily machine learning, which are still very kind of useful. And would you kind of draw out some of the distinctions between some of the kind of different methods and stuff as well, or?
Yes, absolutely. And that's something we also tell our clients, is where you should use machine learning and where you don't really need to use machine learning. So where machine learning really fits is when we have input, when we know the input and we know the output, but we don't know what connects them. What is the algorithm that connects the two? So this is where machine learning can fit, especially when the relationship is very complex. However, if we are dealing with simple situations, think of accounting, very regulated, straightforward. We don't need to use machine learning there because the logic is already known. It can be hard-coded into the software logic, and it is deterministic. You know for sure every time this is the input, every time that will be the output. Machine learning works completely different. It fills the gap between the known input and the known output, and not knowing how the input changed to the output. And if you are forecasting weather, for example, even forecasting sales, there are so many variables that influence this, such as the customer themselves, their income level, and the seasons, and so on. There could be hundreds, thousands of variables. It is impossible for humans to actually account for all of these variables reliably. So this is where machine learning can really help and where it actually shines. Think of image recognition. For years and years, researchers try to develop hard-coded algorithms that can detect your face and your eyes and so on. And they spend years and years doing that. And for this to work, you always have to have a very controlled situation, white background, face filling the frame, and so on. Think of driverless vehicles and how they can accommodate the variable situations in the street, recognizing signs, recognizing other objects, passengers, pedestrians, and so on. This is just utterly impossible with conventional software. We would be dealing with billions, maybe trillions of possible situations. So I think this is the main thing what distinguishes, should we go with machine learning or should we not?
Yeah, no, I think that's really great to point out, actually. And I think it's so interesting and exciting, all the new things which are possible with these technologies. But as you mentioned before, there are certain problems which are probably better solved with some sort of deterministic model. And I think it's getting people's head around sometimes the difference between, say, a probabilistic model versus a deterministic model, and which problems would kind of fit into each category better, right?
Absolutely. And remember, machine learning is probabilistic after all. And the more complex the model is, the more probable it becomes. And as such, lots of machine learning algorithms are seen as black boxes, because remember the gap between the input and the output, and for us not knowing what's in between. Machine learning can't figure that out. But how do we understand? How can we explain the output? Currently, this is a challenge, and especially in regulated industries such as healthcare, even the financial sector. If a bank rejects a loan application, for example, there has to be something like a response code, something so that the staff at the bank can explain to the customer why the application was rejected. And because traditionally they use either linear models or maybe very simple models, which they hard-coded. So a big decision tree, if this then that, if that then this, and then at the end you know why. And this is, with machine learning, this is currently a challenge. And with bigger models, as we can see now, we see some models with really thousands of layers, deep learning with thousands of layers. This is vastly complex. It is quite challenging to explain the output, although it can be very reliable, maybe more reliable than humans in many cases, but because it's a matter of the law and the legislation, which is currently requiring this kind of explanation. We don't know what will happen in the future. I expect some countries to start to loosen up a little bit. I can recall Estonia is one country where they are fully embraced AI, machine learning, and blockchain. Malta is also introducing new legislations to make things that are illegal in some countries like the UK or the US legal, so that they can attract businesses and researchers alike.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting that actually, because there are these trade-offs, and as machine learning becomes more and more common, I think interpretability is going to be this really kind of key thing, because I think, regulation or not, I think that people need to have a certain amount of understanding of how a model sort of works to be able to get some trust in it, right? So I'm not too sure if you guys looked into things like Lime and Shapley models and stuff like that, but those are a few of the things which are helping us to interpret the outputs of machine learning models, which is quite interesting.
Yes, I have seen some attempts, and I'll give you an example. H2O is really pushing for their driverless AI. And this product is where you only need to feed the data into the system, and the system will figure out what models are best, what columns are best, what kind of data pre-processing are necessary. And it is one of the best out there. But I feel it takes a data scientist to interpret the output, because the output is all sort of graphs, relationships, and statistics. So for an average business user, for example, I think there is still so much work to be done to simplify the interpretation, the explanation, into a form that can be understood by a non-data scientist. I don't think we are quite there yet. There's still a lot of work to be done.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree. I mean, there's such a big gap now, because I think the development of machine learning and AI and data science as a whole, just over the last few years, has just been this kind of, hockey stick shaped curve. And I think we're starting to explore so many new technologies, some of them mature, some of them not so mature. And I think there's this big gap where people are really trying to figure out, how do we actually use this in practice, right? So
It is always a big issue, especially in business. There's a new technology. Let's try it out. And you have been going to many events. We have been going to many events as well throughout the last 12 months or so. And the theme is really, the common theme is, we see there is a lot of research but very little development. There is so much focus on developing models that are state of the art. There's very little or much less interest in how to use these models. And if you remember in 2009, when Netflix issued this competition for data scientists that can beat the accuracy of their model, and the prize was $1 million. And indeed, data scientists around the world participated, and one team managed to win the prize. They won the $1 million, and they gave the model to Netflix. And what do you think Netflix did with that model, which beaten their own model? Nothing. They couldn't figure out a way to actually implement it. So at the end of the day, they continue to use their own model they developed in-house.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. That I think that they did actually extract some portions out of it, but I think this is the really interesting thing, actually, because you mentioned the Netflix competition, and these days another thing which is really popular are all the Kaggle competitions.
Kaggle, yes, yeah.
And I think one of the things with a lot of these competitions is, how do you score how well these things actually do? And basically, the way that people have been scoring these things are based on some form of accuracy or something like that. And a lot of times, the more accurate that you get with a model, the slower it takes to run and the less interpretable it is. So a lot of these super highly accurate models are these kind of ensemble models, which are not just one machine learning algorithm,
an ensemble
but a whole collection of them.
Many different models, and they can be, I'm glad you mentioned this, they can be a great pain to deploy into production, the resources they will take. And think of companies that need to serve multiple requests, maybe 100,000 of requests every few seconds. This can be a real challenge. And sometimes the question is it worth? Because if you see the complexity and the accuracy, the relationship is not a straight line, but it is exponential. I mean, you can build a relatively simple model that may be good enough, and it will only cost you 20% compared to a model that is super many in symbols, super complex, that will be 10% more accurate. Sometimes you think, where's the trade-off? This is a business decision. It's not a technology decision. Kaggle, as you have just mentioned, is after all, it is a competition. The only metric is accuracy. The team that scores the highest accuracy is a winning team. Everything else is not considered. So it's not a business. It's for data scientists, and it makes the data scientists completely focus on them fine-tuning the algorithms, which is great, but for the accuracy, not for the overall the throughput, for example. Maybe this was one of the reasons that if you see, traditionally we use CPUs and then GPUs, and now Google introduced what they call TPUs, tensor processing unit, which is nothing but a piece of hardware accelerator that only does deep learning, nothing else. Interestingly, NVIDIA reacted very quickly, and now they are integrating tensor cores into their new generation. Even smartphones now, the latest chip from Apple actually includes an AI unit. So maybe that's one thing to mitigate the phenomenon you have just described, is now we're dealing with vastly complex models. Is that necessary? That's again a business question, not always. But this kind of conversation, you don't hear it in every place or every day.
No, no, absolutely. And so I think that's why it's really interesting that you guys are actually business facing. So you're not just doing competitions, which, as we mentioned, are incredibly resources for actually learning up data science and all the different techniques. But as you mentioned before, actually getting something into production, actually getting a machine learning model that solves a business problem, that's where really the key money is made, right?
Absolutely. And I think I would challenge the conventional project life cycle. Um, Traditionally, how software was developed, developer use what they call the waterfall model. So you start with the understanding the requirement, making design, and then you develop something, you integrate it. And that model faced a lot of challenges, and that resulted in another model which is known as a agile methodology, where things the emphasis really is on speed of delivery, and the mindset is do it now, fix it later. And from what I have seen, I think a lot of machine learning or AI projects tend to follow the same agile methodology. Let's develop something and see how it works, and then if it doesn't work, let's do something else. This is nice for research, but if you think of a business context where these models, they cost money, they cost time, and if they don't contribute to the business, that's just a waste. So I think the mindset here, we really need to start with the validation to validate, and by validation is to think of, will this model actually answer the business problem at hand? So the business need to define a problem, and then the researchers, the AI or the development team need to think of a solution to answer that particular problem. And then if that is done, then the next thing they can do is to validate, just to make sure that we are actually solving the right problem and not somehow solving another problem or answering another question. And this needs to take place early in the project and not late in the project. What you normally see is validation, verification, and testing or debugging happens at the last phase. So sometimes teams develop a fantastic software that doesn't do what it is supposed to do, which is a huge waste. It's too late to go back and to do it because they need to redo it all over again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you make some really good points there as well. So you were mentioning about figuring out the business question. Now, one of the things I've found, and I don't know if you've kind of experienced this as well, is that a lot of times, because a lot of these technologies are so new, a lot of clients don't necessarily know how to ask the right questions. And so there's a lot of probing actually to figure out what the right question to solve actually is. Because I don't know if you found that a lot of times they'll just give you a chunk of data and say, well, what can you do with this?
Absolutely. This is most of the time, if not all the time, we don't expect the business people to tell us exactly to explain the problem in a data science context, if you will. Even the data, a lot of time they don't even know what data they have and how the data they have will contribute or if there's anything missing. So that's why we call ourselves problem solvers. We sit with the business people, speak with them, let them say what they have, let them explain their problems in their own words, and we would spend time with their people actually we would get involved in the actual business process. That's why we figure out what's right, what is not right, and then we can think of a solution that will work. So our approach is kind of bottom up. So we start with the details, low level operation details, and that gives us the visibility of their own operation, their actual operations on the ground, because you often see a disconnect between the top management, the people you speak with, and the people who are doing the actual work. And people at the top don't seem to understand the operations at sufficient detail. So we have to go down, we have to speak with those people to understand what is the pain, what are the actual problems, and then yes, we can think of a solution for that. This time-consuming process, and sometimes some clients don't like it. They think it is unnecessary. But we do insist that we do it the right way, we do it the right thing, and we don't need to. And it actually saves time because it means we don't need to go back and fix things. The only thing we need to fix is the debugging or fixing code, which is, I would say, the easiest. I'm sure from your experience, fixing code is just quite simple. If the client is happy and if their budget allows, we do develop a proof of concept model for them to actually visualize, and we use that also to verify the solution. So yes, that's a problem. As we understand, that's our answer to this problem. Now let's see if our answer actually is correct. So if you explain things, it's harder for your client, for your audience. But when you show them something, that looks nice. And a lot of time, this prototype, we don't develop it further and build a production model out of it, because when you develop a prototype like this, it's a quick and dirty, right? You don't want to build on top of it. So we use it just to prove the concept, and once that is confirmed, then yes, we know what to do exactly and how we do it. So we build a new package, a new software correctly from the ground up.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense, right? Because I mean, really, the job is a lot of business consulting, right? There's a huge part of it which is actually helping people figure out exactly what the problem is and how to solve it. I mean, technology is really just, I guess, an enabler of that, right?
Absolutely.
So, I think when it comes down to it, it's fundamentally understanding a business, understanding what are the processes that go on inside of a business. And obviously, computers can do things like billions of times faster than any human can. But, it's really about figuring out where that makes the most sense to actually insert that, right? Because even if you have very, very manual processes, maybe there isn't sufficient data being collected, or it's not practical to collect data to automate those certain processes and different things like that, right?
Yes, it's really situation by situation. Every client, every company has their own data, and a lot of cases actually we just provide consulting because some companies, they are just not ready yet for the change. And for me, what is AI or IT project? I always say there is no such a thing as an IT project. There is business change project that involves computers, hardware, software, algorithms, machine learning, you name it. The mindset should be business change. And when you say business change, it means the business people are the owner of this project. What you find in practice is IT projects are just dumped to the IT department. Oh, it's an IT thing. Let them do it. Let them fix it. And you often find systems that do not integrate or do not answer the right questions because of this disconnect, because business people distance themselves from IT, from this change project, because they think, oh, it is just technology, it's not business.
Yeah. No, and I think that's such a shame in a way, because you think of the kind of billions of dollars that go into IT projects sometimes. And, a lot of work and effort goes into these projects for these projects to effectively not get adopted quite often, right? Which is just really kind of sad to see, just because, as you mentioned, the disconnect basically, when there's not enough involvement, right, between the clients and the project, then, people don't use the systems, or people don't use the systems properly, or they don't integrate, or whatever it is, or they find out they have to do some massive overhaul, and then that's not in the budget, or whatever it is, right?
Yes.
Right. I mean, can I just interject there? So what I found is, based upon the conversation that you're both having, that is the main snag when it comes to the business aspect, because when you're looking at it as a problem of business data, what I find the human being, the business operators, they're human. They're human beings. They're not robots. They're not automatons. So just the conversation that, you've had with, my business partner there, it shows you how when you're speaking to a human being, a lot of that goes over their heads because for them to embrace this technology, you have to appeal to their human, you have to appeal to their psychology. And that's what it is. A lot of the times, the breakdown in communication is because the business owners are human. They respond to human thoughts. They respond to behavioral economics, not ones and zeros and binary. So it could be okay that you go in there, you have a look at their business, you do all of this, but at the end of the day, the business owners have got to like you. Anything to do with business, they've got to like you. You've got to have tonation in your voice. You've got to be warm. There's a cultural thing. In my previous life as buying businesses, straight away, one of the first problems that you have is when you do mergers and acquisitions, a lot of the times the reason why the business falls on its head, it's because of the cultural difference of one business to another. So when you go into the business and you speak to the business operators, it really has little to do with their data. It has little to do with the ideas that they think they have. It has more to do with their own personal culture, because the business is a reflection of the business owner, who is a human being. And I think a lot of the times when data scientists and programmers are speaking, they speak in a language that is almost like sacrosanct to them. And the problem you have is you're not trying to convince another data scientist. You're trying to open up the gate to have a conversation. You have to rethink your whole strategy of communicating with a human being. And the conversation you just had there just proves it, that it's above the average individual, that they want to simplify things to colors of pictures. Anything else is too expensive. They don't trust, you're speaking too much, and the deal is done.
No, thanks for that, Milo. I think you made some really, really great points there. Because as you mentioned, like programming and data science and a lot of these things are a completely different language. But who are we doing these things for anyway? Eventually, ultimately, we're doing these to solve problems for people. We're doing this to solve problems for businesses. And if we can't make that connection, then everybody really loses out, right?
Absolutely.
Correct. I mean, what sort of difficulties have you seen in your day-to-day with business owners and colleagues? I mean, I'm sure some of your experiences are vastly interesting and eye-opening.
For myself, I think that, as you mentioned, there's a massive education gap between people who run the businesses and the technology. So I think one of the things that we were discussing earlier on as well was the fact that these days there is no really limitation of technology anymore. Like, technology is not the limiting block anymore. If you want to spin up a server, you've got like the cloud and all this kind of stuff like that, which you can kind of 5 minutes, you've got a server up and running. So a lot of the barriers technology-wise just really aren't there anymore. Anybody could set something up and have something up and running within hours, which is absolutely incredible. But where the gap really is, I think, is just this disconnect between how people think of their business processes. I think a lot of the times businesses are so used to doing things a certain way that for instance, a lot of businesses use, say, Excel, right, for a lot of their business processes. And I find that it's used so much that it almost starts to shape the way that they think about their business processes, right? So they're not thinking about their business processes in terms of this data goes from this point to this point and we make a decision off this particular piece of data. They're actually starting to think of things like, oh, well, I put this into this spreadsheet here and then I do a VLOOKUP. And, there's these things which become process orientated around a specific technology. Which is, I think, kind of a real mistake there. And sometimes I think you almost have to go back and kind of completely re-engineer that and say, well, what are you really trying to do? Because if we completely re-engineer this thing, we could eliminate all these manual steps out of the middle and have a massive cost saving and make this run like a 1,000 times faster or whatever it is, right?
Yes, absolutely, Jonathan. And usually the first topic we learn in project management is change management. And whether it is an individual or whether it is an organization, like we mentioned, if there's an existing culture, an existing norm, and now you are trying to introduce change, and how change will be faced. So you face denial when you start. It's you. That's really the common cycle. It's always start with denial. People don't want to change. They are doing things they are happy with, uh, they're comfortable with. That's their comfort zone. They don't want to venture outside this. There is fear. So there is always denial for with a change, and the more it takes an engagement, it takes explanation, and it takes a little time for this denial to become resistance. So denial is no. Well, resistance is kind of, it's not it's not 100% no, but there are concerns, there are worries, and there are this and that. And the more you have conversation, the more you engage with the clients. And when I say the clients, it's not only the management, but we're talking about the people at every level in the organization. So the resistance then is lowered and lowered, and it becomes acceptance. Then they accepted. So yes, let's do it. We are happy to do it. And there is still some anxiety. So when the new system or the new change is implemented, it also takes a little bit of learning curve, so that this acceptance then become confidence. And when they are confident with the product, then you have nothing more to worry. So I think this is not something data scientists are usually concerned about. Data scientists are concerned about, yes, we developed the solution, we developed this model, this algorithm, we dump it. Someone else has to take care of the rest, what happens afterward. But as you just pointed out, it just doesn't work, unfortunately. So that's something we always keep in mind when we engage with clients. Maybe the management is happy. Usually when the management when companies contact us, it's almost always because they have a problem. They have a serious problem they are unable to deal with. They want firefighters. They want someone to put off this fire. That's their immediate concern. They don't often think of a long-term solution, unfortunately. So we try to take this opportunity to establish our relationship with them, and then try to help them expand their business. And we don't like to do, temporary fixes for long-term problems. We always introduce long-term solutions, and it's up to, of course, the client to accept, and not just the business people, but also how they deal with it, how they train their people, how they introduce the change. Sometimes the change, the company, the management might say, hey, from this date you stop using this, you start using that, and when who's still using the old system, maybe some measures will be taken. This is a very negative way. There always has to be a positive way, because when you introduce change, you want to lower anxiety. Anxiety will be there, denial and resistance will be there. So that is something they need to do, and we explain this. We help our clients with this as much as we can.
Right. No, that's great. Yeah, I mean, I think that as you mentioned, not something that data scientists necessarily think of, but not like data science isn't hard enough on its own already anyway. But I think that it's tough, right? Because without some of these things, without the change management, and this is massive change. I mean, I think change management was already difficult enough in the times of IT, where basically, okay, we'll take this process and we automate it. And now, there's this massive fear around AI and robots taking over jobs and all this kind of thing as well. And completely uninterpretable models and all these kind of things, which people don't understand, which I think it makes it all the more difficult, really.
Absolutely. And it's always the communication, the engagement. So we need to build trust with our clients. As my colleague Milo mentioned, it's all about, people buy into people buy into emotion. So instead of trying to explain that this model will do this and will do that to business people, that will actually increase their anxiety, because they don't understand. So we try to build this trust, personal trust, through engagement, and when they trust us, then they will trust what we propose. They will trust our solutions, even though they don't really necessarily understand the solution, but they trust that we will deliver the right thing.
Yeah,
And,
no, I think that's a really good point, actually.
yeah, and just to interject there and following on, it's about engaging. So that there's an old saying that says, "You can tell me I'll forget, show me I'll remember, but have me involved and I'll know." And that is where the collaboration comes in play. So when we're speaking to college lecturers and their sort of their cohorts, it's just not good enough talking to them. It's engaging them, going through the processes, showing them how simple it is. You know, we can spend hundreds and thousands of hours among ourselves to do these fantastic algorithms, to do all of this, give the pie chart, or the charts, the scatter plots, but it's not about us as individuals. It's not about us as a company. It's about our clients and their needs and their wants. And it's more to do with, look, you've been on this trajectory for the past 5 years. Do you want your company to fail? The answer is no. Do you want your children and your grandchildren to look back and see that you didn't do enough for them to be on a better level in life? No. And all of these questions have nothing to do with data science. It has nothing to do with algorithms. It has everything to do with the individual and what they want, and finding a solution for their problem. And then when they have that and we engage with them, we give them an option of, look, we don't want to be, you know, we don't want you to feel like we're your only, you know, your only way out. We don't want you to feel like you're taking your car to the mechanic and every time there's a problem, you're having to go back and pay more for the service. We want you to understand exactly what's going on in a simple way to engage you. And then once you feel comfortable, it's for you, because you best know how to conduct your business, because you are the intelligent one, the entrepreneur that started a business in the first place. So you have all of the power and you have that intellect to take your team and the people that depend on you to the next level. And what we want to do is just show you the way, and that's it. And that way, it's God. It really reduces the anxiety, and you engage, and you have a beautiful relationship.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I mean, if it was to use an analogy, would you say it's a bit like, well, you know, like somebody doesn't really care what kind of nails a builder uses to build their house, right? They just want
Exactly.
to, yeah.
Exactly. And I think a lot of, I don't think, but it seems like when you're speaking about Kaggle, when you're speaking about all of these institutions with data science, you go there. And for me, I just find it's boring, because it's almost like everyone is a gatekeeper. So it seems like everyone is in competition with themselves. It's about, you know, the accuracy. But what is the point of the accuracy if you do not now have a real world problem that needs to be solved? And that's the everyday person, the nurses, the doctors, the lawyers, the architects, the mothers, the parents, the fathers. I mean, this is where, you know, data science and programmers really need to take a step back and go, God almighty, I mean, we're doing all of these things. Yes, we're getting a pat on the back. You're known in the industry. But if you're not known, if you're a rock star in your cohort and no one knows you outside, believe you me, you can forget about it. I mean, Elon Musk, however great he is, he's an individual that's able to be a personality. Bezos, like them or not, Trump, whoever they are, it's all about personality and not necessarily, as you rightfully said, they don't care what nail you use. They just want to know that their house is safe. They want to know, you know, it's not going to fall down in 2 years' time.
You know, I think that's a great point for anybody, actually, whether they're trying to build their career or start a business or working with clients. Is basically that there is, yeah, sure, there's this technical piece to it that you need to know in order to, you know, sort of work your craft, I suppose. But, you know, there's a huge part of it as well, which is really just this whole communication part, getting out there, kind of marketing yourself, being able to communicate with others, right? And I think there's great ways of doing that. I mean, these days, a lot of there's a lot of talks about, well, maybe you should like start a blog, start getting used to giving talks and presentations so that you're learning to be able to communicate your ideas more effectively in different ways, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's why we don't refer to ourselves as data scientists. With clients, we refer to ourselves as problem solvers. We don't speak with them about algorithms. We don't expect them, our clients, to understand. Of course, technology is a critical piece here that underpins the solution that we'll implement. Just that we just keep it, away from these technical details. It is something we do at the back end, but at the front end, our communication, we simplify it, layman terms, business terms, whatever term the client is comfortable with. So we need to make them feel at home. And when we go back and then, we start the hard work. Yeah, that's what they want to do. And then we figure out what data we need, if we need to ask them more questions, if we need to ask their people more questions, and how we can validate our understanding and our solution. So I think it's a bless that we have the technical ability as well as the business communication ability, and pretty much maybe this is what makes Omni Business Solutions really different from most companies out there.
Yeah, that's great. So anyway, you mentioned before that you are giving now talks to different schools, and you're also helping out businesses, and you also have your product Batlas as well, which gives property insight information. So I just was wondering, how would people, well, who should kind of get in touch with you, and how should people best get in touch with you if they want to perhaps work with you?
We are not limited to one market sector. If you think of Atlas itself, it's location, insight, and intelligence, and why the obvious client would be the retailers, the franchisers, but we also identified essential use cases for banks and insurance companies, lenders. Why? Because they can use it to assess the application risk. So if maybe an entrepreneur wants to open a business somewhere and they need a bank loan, the bank needs to assess the risk, and they don't have, even the largest banks, we have spoken with them, they don't have a tool. They have a set of tools, spreadsheets, as you mentioned, and other things, and it's down to the individual member of staff with their own experience, and usually they are not experienced in these different sectors. So this can be a massive help for them. Local authorities, they want to optimize their high streets. They want to optimize businesses in their areas. They want to make sure more businesses surviving, because that means business rate. If obviously about the business rate here, and they want to make sure more people are employed, because this means they will need to worry less about unemployment in their areas. So it can really benefit many clients in different sectors. And we ourselves, because we have mixed backgrounds, mixed experiences, so we are not really focused on just one sector. Education is one of them, and we actually have plans to open a training center, kind of to bring in the young people, have them trained. We want them to be exposed to the technology, to see how the technology work, the front end and the back end. So when they finish their college, they are equipped for the job. And what you see now, fresh graduates can't get a job because everyone wants this number of years of experience, which they don't have. If no one employs them, if no one helps them out, how they are going to get their first job? You see.
Okay, no, that's great. And just any kind of last thoughts or ideas you wanted to share with everybody here?
Sure. Well, from my perspective, as always, it's all about collaboration. It's all about partnering up. Whatever business you have, whatever you want to get to, you can't do it on your own. You have hands, your thumb, your fingers. They come together for a common purpose. It's either to hug your child, to kiss your wife, to open up a beer bottle and drink for an enjoyment. It needs a team. And moving forward, it is all about teamwork. And whoever you are, data scientist, programmer, business owner, you have to be open to the idea of what's happening. Together we stand, divided we fall. And going forwards now, there's too much fear that is based on nothing more than unnecessary, phobia. Is rational fear. But once we come together, make everything simple, and we work as a collective, we can move forwards and everybody can have a win-win. It's a simple game theory. But a lot of individuals, because they're trying to hide, because they think you don't need to think anything. Go out there, get involved, do it, and the world will open up to you. And we provide solutions for you, for your benefit, and that's what it is. Simple.
No, I think that's great. I think that, these days there's so much knowledge and information that, people think they need to acquire to start doing things. But I think what's probably more important than going off and learning every single thing there is more to have an appreciation for everybody. And I think this is, to your point, all about working in teams, working together, really learning to appreciate different people's skills and what different people bring to the table, because there's so many things that actually need to happen to not just implement technology, but implement technology and then make it something real that's actually going to add value to businesses as well.
Yeah, because if people don't realize, we are on the verge of a renaissance. If you look at the UK, the economy, the disenfranchisement of the youth, the disenfranchisement of individuals in businesses themselves, and going out on your own, you've experienced this, I'm sure. You have a fantastic channel. Before we met you, I already knew about you, and you're reaching people on so many levels, and people speak about having blogs, but how do you stand out if there's hundreds and thousands of individuals out there speaking about the same subject that you're having? Well, the way that you stand above everyone else is if you go out there and you get involved with the local community, as we say, getting your hands dirty, partnering up with individuals like us, just to have an idea, not to necessarily say, oh my God, you've got to do this, but just get used to the idea. And that way, some individuals that we might pass you off with, it could be very fruitful, because at the end of the day, it's putting food on the table to sustain your family's life, to sustain everyone's family's life, so you can see the children grow, so you can have a fundamentally better society that is supportive of a family of well-being. And that's what fundamentally it all boils down to. Anything else is just abstractions of trying to get from A to B, but to get from A to B is collaboration. And I believe that machine learning is so for individuals to take the monotony out of everything, so they can focus on the growth of the interpersonal skills and building a nice and great community amongst each other. And to me, that's just what it seems to be. I know everyone's speaking about AI and whatever, but fundamentally it's the survival. But survival is not going to be done if we do not come together in a collaborative effort for the betterment of everyone.
Oh, thank you for that. So anyway, I think it's been a great conversation here today, and we'll let you guys get on with your day. But thank you so much for your time.
Fantastic.
Thank you so
very
much.
much.